The Psalms ask God questions, hard questions, big questions, questions we might think God would be offended to hear. The Psalms are unafraid to be utterly, brutally honest with God because He welcomes us and hears us. Ironically, expressing this kind of raw emotion to God leads us to greater trust and safety in His steadfast love. Psalm 13, to the choir master, a psalm of David. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have prevailed over him, lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. In the first two verses of Psalm 13, David asks 5 questions, 4 of which begin with the words, how long? And even repeating those words itself communicates the prolonged suffering that David is experiencing. How long? How long? How long? How long? David focuses on his relationship with God in the first 3 questions. How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? That last line is a painful reversal of the famous Aaronic blessing in number 6. As opposed to the Lord making his face shine upon you, David feels as though God has turned his back on him. In the third, how long, David reveals his inner turmoil. How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? When we suffer, we are not only wrestling with spiritual, existential questions like where is God, but we are also carrying the weight of mental and emotional struggles. And on top of all this, David acknowledges external conflicts as well. How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? We don't know the circumstances that led to this string of questions, although some suggest that it was an encounter with one of David's many enemies, or perhaps a physical sickness. Either way, what's clear is that David is painfully, emotionally, urgently pleading with God to do something. It's not quite the stark cry of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? But Psalm 13 does have a sense of long suffering, similar to Psalm 6. One scholar rephrases the key questions as, how distressingly long? David is frustrated, he's confused, he's even angry because it seems like he is suffering day after day while God is doing nothing. He vents his emotions, and yet we must also remember that this is a poem with structure and repetition. David is expressing his pain with a pattern. He also uses the covenantal term Yahweh, which appears in our Bibles as the Lord in all caps. This is not David raving against the unknown divine. He is still connected with his God, and that gives him the relational foundation to ask these bold, even uncomfortable questions. The questions of verses 1 to 2 turn into a prayer in verses 3 and 4, and this prayer has 2 sets of 3 phrases. First, David asks God to 1, consider, 2, to answer, and 3, to light up his eyes. The first 2 are connected. David wants God to stop ignoring him and to listen, like a child asking their parents to put away any distractions, turn toward them, and give them undivided attention. The last request, light up my eyes, means to brighten the soul, to restore him spiritually and emotionally, to refresh and energize him completely. It's also another clever connection back to the same line of the Aaronic blessing of number 6 that David has referenced before, the Lord's face shining upon you. It's a direct link, between the hard questions of the previous verses to his petitions here. After the first set of 3 requests, David follows it with 3 things that will happen if God does not act. Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say I have prevailed over him, lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. He's worried that if all his fears come true about God abandoning him, David's inevitable end will be lying down in the sleep of death, with his enemies dancing over his grave in joy, because David, the strong king who united the tribes of Israel, is shaken, toppled, and gone. It's like David is clinging to the rope of divine grace, and he's hoping that that rope will hold. This is what trust and faith truly means. Reaching out and holding for dear life onto God's goodness, faithfulness, and sovereign power, even when everything around you says, you're lost, it's done, just give up. That's the tension we feel as we transition to the final 2 verses. Psalm 13 ends with these words, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation, for I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me." For all that David has said so far, the bitter questions and the foreboding threat of what would happen if God doesn't answer, this ending is a bit surprising. Is David just putting on a religious mask, stuffing down his feelings with a chipper, insincere faith? I don't think so, and here's a few reasons why. First, the word I is emphatic in the first line, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love." This is David stepping forward, standing firm, staking his life on the God whom he believes will not let him down. As we've already seen, even in his questions and prayers, David uses the covenantal name Yahweh, and he also uses the important word chesed, which we've discussed previously on the podcast and means faithful, loyal, love. David puts his trust in the faithfulness of the God who made promises to his people to love them and save them forever. And those promises don't go away just because we are suffering. There's another clue that David isn't simply brushing his troubles under the religious rug, and it's the last line. "I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me." Bountifully means he has treated me well, or even he has paid me what I am due. And notice that David speaks in the past tense. He has dealt bountifully with me. The idea is that David feels like God has done good to him, that he has not left him hanging on a rope, but that when he looks back at the whole torturous journey of his life, God has done right by him. He's answered his prayers. He's brought David back to a place of hope. One commentator uses the imagery of a storm over the sea that begins to wane. Psalm 13 begins with a terrible lament, and then it moves to a less agitated prayer, and then finally the waters become calm and still, as David comes back to the certain truth that God is worthy of our trust, no matter what. Throughout the Bible, God shows immense respect to people who ask hard questions, who press into God's mysteries out of a place of pain. People like Abraham, Moses, Job, and Habakkuk show us that faith is not incompatible with doubt. In fact, greater honesty with God is what leads us to greater intimacy with God, because we are allowed to struggle and wrestle within the safe confines of a loving relationship with a Father who will never let us go. This is what Jesus himself modeled in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he died. With such distress and sorrow as to make him sweat drops of blood, Jesus prayed, "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." Agony and trust, fear and submission. And on the cross, Jesus displayed the perfect, steadfast love of the Lord by sleeping the sleep of death for our salvation. His enemies mocked him, rejoicing and saying, "We've prevailed over him." But it was through this defeat that Jesus achieved the greatest victory, because the Father did not forget him, but raised him from the dead and crushed the enemy of death. He dealt bountifully with his Son, and through the sacrifice of Jesus, he will deal bountifully with us too. We can ask questions and pray with groans too deep for words, but one day, all of our questions will be answered as we see the light of God's face shine on us. So God's people sing and rejoice, because when Jesus returns, even death cannot win. How long will that be? Jesus tells us on the last page of the Bible. It won't be long. It'll be soon. In all that we've seen, you might have an idea of how you could pray Psalm 13, but here are some ideas to get you started. When it seems like God is delaying answering your prayer, or maybe he's not listening at all. When you feel as though you're in the dark, forgotten, abandoned, alone, or lost. When you've been told or taught that your emotions don't matter, that you must either ignore them or suppress them. When we are bold in challenging God and asking him the hardest questions that we might not even want to say aloud. When rivals and foes cheer at your failures and rub salt in your wounds. When you see someone with a natural brightness in their eyes, a radiance that wells up from the joy inside. When you are on the edge of defeat and you don't know if it's all going to crumble around you. When you can look back on the past weeks or months or years and you can see God's goodness toward you. When you sing through tears, because that is all you can do to survive this season of suffering. When you want to stretch the muscles of your faith so that you can trust God more firmly and securely. Psalm 13, to the choir master, a psalm of David. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have prevailed over him, lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. Thank you for listening to the Woven Psalms. This podcast is a ministry of Rock Hill Community Church in Duluth, Minnesota. I'm Mike Solis. I'm a pastor at Rock Hill and the writer of this podcast. Ethan Gibbs is our producer, editor, and composer of the theme music. Our logo was designed by Bo Walsh. This podcast uses the English Standard Version published by Crossway. We want to give a special thanks to Poor Bishop Hooper for allowing us to use the music from their Every Psalm project. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please share it with others. You can learn more about our work at wovenpsalms.com.